Right, we're going to get into an expose now on the topic of cancer. And knowledge of cancer is speculated. I don't think it's speculated at all. To go back as far as ancient Egyptian medical practice around 2500 BC. What a coincidence that is. But in more modern times, during the Renaissance, beginning in the 15th century, scientists developed greater understanding of the human body, and scientists like Galileo and Newton began to use the scientific method, which later was used to study the disease. Now, autopsies done by Harvey in 1628 then led to an understanding of the circulation of blood through the heart and body that had until then been a mystery. And yet in 1761, Giovanni Morgagni of Padua was the first to do something which has become routine today, and he did autopsies to relate the patient's illness to pathologic findings after death. And this laid the foundation for the scientific oncology, which is the study of cancer. And yet, miss out the key component: astral travel. Just saying. Now, the famous Scottish surgeon John Hunter, Chili Jocko, suggested that some cancers might be cured by surgery and described how surgeons might decide which cancers to operate on. Now, Hunter himself was in league with the Jenner family, yes, the same family line, and it has recently been alleged that Hunter's brother William and his brother's former tutor William Smellie were responsible for the deaths of many women whose corpses were used for their studies on pregnancy. And Hunter is alleged to have been connected to these deaths since at the time he was acting as his brother's assistant. Now, there are several John Hunter hospitals named after him. The John Hunter Clinic of the Chelsea and Westminster Hospital in London, as is the John Hunter Hospital in Newcastle, Australia, and the Hunterian Neurosurgical Laboratory of the Johns Hopkins Hospital. Well, I never. And notwithstanding that, Hunter's house was the setting for the Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde movie also. Oops. And he said if the tumour had not invaded nearby tissue and was movable, there is no impropriety in removing it. Now, a century later, the development of the anaesthesia allowed surgery to flourish, and classic cancer operations such as the radical mastectomy were developed. But in the 19th century saw the birth of scientific oncology with the use of the modern microscope in studying diseased tissues. And Rudolf Virchow, often called the founder of cellular pathology, provided the scientific basis for the modern pathological study of cancer. And Morgagni had linked autopsy findings seen with the unaided eye with the clinical course of illness, so Virchow correlated this microscopic pathology to the illness. And this method not only allowed a better understanding of the damage that cancer had done, but also aided the development of cancer surgery. Now, body tissues were removed by the surgeon, could now be examined, and a precise diagnosis could be made. And the pathologist could also tell the surgeon whether the operation had completely removed the cancer. Now, today, cancer treatments are still quite primitive. I wonder why. Perhaps we'll find out. Often relying on surgery to remove cancerous tissue in the hope that it has not already spread to other tissue. If it has, then this may result in further surgery and so on. Now, other treatments include radiotherapy, usually using X-rays, which were discovered in 1895. And in the region of 40% of people with cancer receive radiotherapy. But as well as destroying the DNA of cancerous cells, the therapy also causes severe damage to healthy tissues. And the theory is that normal tissues are more able to repair themselves than the cancerous cells. Now, chemotherapy uses a single cytotoxic drug or cocktail of drugs which are poisonous to the cells. And the aim is to kill off the cancer cells. But like we said, this also has the effect of killing healthy cells as well. Now, one of the most common side effects of that is hair loss. And despite cancer being known to more modern medical science for over 250 years, and billions upon billions spent on research, there is no effective cure, according to the system, and treatments still rely on old and highly damaging methods and a lot of hope. Now, new and effective treatments seem to have made very little progress in the past century or so, and primarily involve tinkering with existing treatments. But the reality is that around 50% of people diagnosed with cancer will die from the disease. And in the United States, the death rate from cancer has only been reduced by about 16% over a 20-year period, which is not a particularly glowing statistic by any means. And there has been even less reduction in death from the disease in the UK. All this despite this. One of the biggest cancer charities in the UK is Cancer Research UK, which is a registered charity with a generated income for the last financial statement, which was 2014, of £537 million, which is about $700 million a year. A charity which provides support to cancer patients is Macmillan Cancer Support, with a generated income for the same period of £156 million, which is about $185 million. In the United States, the American Cancer Society generated an income of $925 million, according to the last available accounts, which is November 2013. $925 million 8 years ago. And for what? More research, of which anything of value is discarded? It's a complete and utter waste of people's money, and would have been better going to local charities that actually achieve something. And now, if those funds was to go into the TPC, we would produce cures, not treatment. $925 million a year, and that was 8 years ago. And in addition to major charities, there are a number of national organisations in many countries and regions such as Europe, which also generate significant revenue from public and also commercial sources. Cancer is a very big business, and here's why. Drug companies are making huge profits from sales of expensive targeted drug therapies. The sale of Xalkori, lung cancer, and Zelboraf, melanoma, account for around 46% of the estimated whopping $100 billion in cancer drug sales worldwide. And right there is the reason for no cures. because cures doesn't make the shekels. And they did warn us on the Georgia Guidestones of a much reduced population and gave the solution behind it, saying don't be a cancer on the planet. Be not a cancer upon the earth, leave room for nature, it said. Now, there have been many claims of cures, including the German scientist who actually cured cancer in 1927. He was killed in 1928. And then there's the famous banking family named guy called Otto Heinrich Warburg, who was said to have cured cancer back in 1923. Now, cancer grows in oxygen-deprived acidic tissue, and diseases cannot survive in an alkaline body. Deprive a cell of 35% of its oxygen for 48 hours and it may become cancerous. Remember the oxygen cutting going on in India? Perhaps there is your answer why. But why did so many need the oxygen to begin with is the great question. Now, Johanna Budwig, a German scientist, found the cancer cure back in 1951. She was a 6-time nominee for the Nobel Prize and held 2 doctorates, one in medicine and one in pharmaceutical chemistry. She also found the cure for cancer as well as numerous other diseases like arthritis, diabetes, cardiovascular problems and liver dysfunctions. And what she discovered was that the cancer cells are simply cells that lack the necessary at a molecular level with the right photons and neutrons in order to mature. Furthermore, she found that the red blood cells of cancer patients have no fatty layer, unlike the ones in healthy people. And this led to the cure of cancer, which showed a 90% success rate back in 1951. And she successfully treated numerous cancer patients, even the ones in stage 4, after the therapy with radiation and failed surgery. And her cancer treatments included nutrition and diet changes. Now, back at the time, she used this combination, and the diet contained no additives, no animal products except for the quark, which is a cheese or a cottage cheese combined with flaxseed oil. And this combination of protein and oil provided the necessary nutrients on a molecular level, so the cancer cells were absorbed or sloughed off while the body was completely healthy after only 3 months. But then we come to a bloodline family who has withheld the cure from society along with pharmaceutical companies and their desire for shekels. The Rockefeller cure. A Dr. Day made a statement back in the 1960s about a cure for cancer and many other eugenic-style items, which we will cover in another show. And it said it is difficult to get information concerning a possible cure direct from Rockefeller University, which is understandable if Dr. Day's statement is correct, and there is no reason for it not to be. Now, the university is involved in cancer research through its Anderson Center for Cancer Research, which was established to encourage and support collaborations and approaches in development, treatment, and researching cures. And cancer has been researched at the Rockefeller University when it was an institute since around 1911. And several milestones in cancer research have been attributed to the Rockefeller scientists. Now, since cancer has been researched in the relatively modern age, there have been many claims of treatments said to cure cancer, and many claims that cures are being suppressed by large drug companies and other organizations such as the Rockefeller Institute University. And the claims have prompted many countries, including the US and the UK, to introduce legislation specifically designed to prevent claims of treatment which alleged to cure cancer. Blocked it. Because it did not originate from standard scientific practices. And in one way, the legislation can be seen as controlling claims made by manipulators and charlatans to protect vulnerable people, and on the other, it can be seen as suppressing any potential cure which does not originate from the standard medical practice and research. And ultimately, as we all know, it achieves the compartmentalization the old world was famous for, and then introduced the monopoly groups. And unfortunately, there are far more unscrupulous people in society who will take advantage of people and promote therapies or remedies which will have little or no effect, with some causing health problems. But that actually explains the standard medical procedure group, does it not? And they cited an example, the largely unregulated diet slimming industry, where products have been sold based on dubious claims or references at an inflated price, effectively preying on the vulnerability of others. On the other hand, the claim that something has the potential to cure cancer relies on the scientific community seeing initial credibility in the claim and conducting further research within established scientific testing models. But in reality land, the chances of something being researched by the scientific community are slim. And unless the source of the claim is already established within that community and it falls within the remit of their current research, which is often influenced by their financiers who may have other interests. Yes, they always have other interests. The shekels plus agendas, dictated by World Horror Organizations, the UN and other leading anti-human groups. And these interests are often commercial. And unless there is a potential profit in a claimed cure, it is highly unlikely that any research will receive funding, which is exactly how a cartel or monopoly is created. And this effectively reduces the chances of anything which may be freely available to the population from being researched. And again, we are moving into the corridors of power where profit dictates what will and will not be permitted at each stage of the process. And as with many other major scientific discoveries, especially in health science, it is often said that maverick scientists who bring about real change. Casting aside the dogma and rules imposed on them, the maverick scientist conducts real research and considers all possibilities while attempting to reach their goal. And a more recent example of this was a UK researcher, Professor Jerry Potter. Now, back in 2001, I remember when it came out, Potter hit the headlines with claims that he had discovered a drug that could rapidly kill cancer cells with 0 side effects. And he claimed that the drug could almost eradicate cancerous cells within 24 hours and was 10,000 times more toxic to the cancer cells than healthy ones. 10,000 times. and by comparison, chemotherapy is at best only twice as toxic to cancerous cells as healthy ones. Now, Potter made his discovery within 2 weeks of starting his research. Oh, well, it was all going so well until the 2 weeks kicked in. But the drug, which could come in tablet form, he said only becomes toxic when it comes into contact with an enzyme that is found in cancer cells. And in the laboratory test, the drug destroyed 95% of cancer cells with the enzyme, including those of breast, colon, stomach, and also brain cancer. Now, tumours resistant to other forms of treatment were also destroyed, and Potter predicted that it could take as long as a decade before the drug became available on the market because of the testing process for new drugs. In addition to clinical trials lasting many years, investors were sought so that the trials and further research could continue. And the results of these trials may also result in the drug being approved for some areas of treatment and not others. And even when clinical trials are completed, it can take a considerable time before a drug becomes available to those who would benefit from it, with cost to health authorities being the main deciding factor. Costs to health authorities being the deciding factor. Really, not people's health. But all that research and testing and trials and over a decade and various stages to go through before a drug is approved, it's funny how none of which of that applied to the COVID vaccine candidates. Funny that. The commercialization takes over the overly bureaucratic and dogmatic systems, effectively inhibit effective treatments coming to the market, as each minor technicality is scrutinized by hordes of scientists and accountants. Accountants. And this can place a potentially valuable treatment in limbo for many years. Common sense question. What has accountants got to do with medical cures anyway? Does anyone ask? In my opinion, a ceiling of 10% profits on all medical care, treatments and supplies should apply globally. Because the idea that people are making vast profits off of others being sick is in and of itself a deep sickness, and dare I say it, a cancer stain on humanity. 10% maximum. Although it has to be said, it is debatable of just how human those implementing these programs really are. Now, as of today, access to effective cancer treatments is not available to every person who would potentially benefit from it, even though Potter's discovery, which is one of many beneficial discoveries in the field of cancer research, was made back in 2001. And the treatment of cancer is still based in very barbaric and ineffective treatments such as surgery and chemotherapy, with a survival rate of 50% at best. But the product of chopping people up and blasting them with highly damaging and toxic chemicals is still considered to be acceptable. And other less destructive methods could be available right now. But taking the overall picture into account, it is highly likely that effective cancer treatments have been suppressed in the past, and the reason could be as simple as the lack of the scientific community of the period failing to take notice of the new discoveries outside of their narrow perspectives, or the lack of financial interest in the development. Why does it always need to be about money? And Rockefeller may be no different to many other organisations in this respect. Profit before doing what is best for the majority of the population. Or maybe the lack of interest in curing the disease is actually part of a wider agenda to keep the Earth's population under control. Now, to repeat what Dr. Day said, quote, "But consider if people stopped dying of cancer, how rapidly we would become overpopulated. You may as well die of cancer as something else," he said. Final reminder of the quote on the Georgia Guidestones. Be not a cancer upon the earth. Leave room for nature. But perhaps a new term is required for the people. Be not a Hebrew Anunnaki parasite upon the earth. Leave room for nurture and nature. Leave room for care and cure. And leave room for need, not greed.